Second meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is non-proliferation. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. President, we regret that some delegations have once again tried to prompt the Security Council to violate its own decisions and rules of procedure. We'd like to underscore once again that any attempts to create an illusion of a purported snapback mechanism having been activated are groundless for a host of reasons which we all know about and which we've drawn your attention to on numerous occasions. Resolution 2231 is no longer in force as of the 18th of October 2025, in keeping with the schedule. On that day, the Security Council stopped its consideration of the Iranian nuclear program and non-proliferation. That agenda item was struck off the list of the Security Council's agenda items. A relevant consensus decision was clearly set forth in Resolution 2231. Therefore, withdrawal of agenda items covered in 507, the President's note, is no longer relevant. It goes without saying that as Resolution 2231 is no longer in force, references to 2016 President's note number 44 is no longer relevant either, in accordance with which the President establishes relevant reports and the Security Council hears briefings on them. Since the 17th of October 2025, the Secretariat hasn't had such a mandate, nor does the Security Council have a mandate to discuss these matters. Mr. President, these facts leave no shadow of a doubt. Initiatives put forward by colleagues to hold today's meeting are not rooted in procedure, but rather in exclusively political considerations. They are trying to impose their opinion on everyone else, foisting this opinion about the snapback on everyone else. They continue to flout the rules and to request meetings on an agenda item which simply doesn't exist, thereby exacerbating the serious divisions we have in the Security Council. The Russian Federation categorically rejects such an approach. In light of the above, we'd like to ask for the Presidency to put the issue of this briefing, the holding of this briefing, to a procedural vote. We call all responsible and conscientious Security Council members to vote against the adoption of the agenda and to prevent certain delegations from undermining the credibility of the Security Council and its decisions so as to further their own interests. I thank you. President, I thank the Russian Federation for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, China supports what has been stated by the Russian Federation. China has repeatedly reiterated that Security Council Resolution 2231 expired and terminated on the 18th of October 2025. The Council has concluded its consideration of the Iranian nuclear issue, and the Secretary General should cease submitting the relevant report. The current situation in the Middle East and the Iranian nuclear issue are at a critical juncture. The Council should play a constructive role in promoting negotiations and de-escalating tensions. Certain members, under the pretext of the so-called support of diplomatic efforts, have insisted on forcing the Council to convene under an agenda item that has already been terminated. This has not only deepened division within the Council, but also undermines the atmosphere for negotiations and seriously hinders the process of seeking a political settlement of the Iran nuclear issue. China is gravely concerned about this. China urges the countries concerned to stop engaging in political manipulation in the Council, faithfully implement the termination day measures under Resolution 2231, uphold the authority of the Council and the credibility of multilateral diplomacy, and create conditions conducive to a political settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for that statement. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. We reject the points made by Russia and China. Today's meeting is fully in line with the decisions and procedure of the Council. The United Kingdom, alongside France and Germany, triggered the snapback procedure in full accordance with Security Council Resolution 2231. We did so because of Iran's significant non-performance of its commitments under the JCPOA. Iran's nuclear escalation has been detailed in over 60 IAEA reports over the last 6 years. The snapback process completed on the 28th of September 2025, and no alternative resolution was agreed. As such, Security Council Resolution 2231 remains in force, and 6 UN Security Council resolutions have come back into force, including sanctions and the 1737 Committee. Iran, and indeed all UN member states, including members of this Council, are obligated to comply with these resolutions. Colleagues, all of us want a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue, but preventing the Council from discussing these vital issues and undermining the UN architecture that was developed by this Council does not bring us closer to that goal. The United Kingdom will therefore vote in favour of the adoption of the agenda, and we urge all Council members to do the same.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, President. I too would like to react to what has just been said by my Russian and Chinese colleagues, and to support what was just said by the representative of the UK. We'd like to recall a few facts. Last September, the Security Council carried out the so-called snapback procedure to reimpose international sanctions against Iran. During this process, this Council rejected on the 19th of September 2025, through a clear vote, a draft resolution which would have permanently lifted sanctions on the Iranian nuclear program. I repeat, the Security Council rejected a draft which would have permanently lifted sanctions on the Iranian nuclear program. Consequently, and in accordance with the provisions of Resolution 2231, the Council restored the 6 resolutions established to restrict the Iranian nuclear program and to ensure that they were for exclusively peaceful purposes. The conclusion of this process also prolonged the application of Resolution 2231. This was to be extinguished only if the Iranian nuclear issue could be considered as definitively settled, and that was why the Secretariat has shared the information on the sanctions and on the 1737 Sanctions Committee. The Resolution 2231 is in force. The Council should be holding half-yearly meetings on this. We also think that it's legitimate for the Council to meet to provide support to ongoing efforts and to achieve a lasting political settlement to the Iranian nuclear issue. It is legitimate for us to have different understandings of the situation. It's normal that we have discussions. Everyone around this table must respect these decisions of the Security Council that brings us all together. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. We strongly reject the assertions made by the representatives of the Russian Federation and China, and fully support the statements that have been made by the representative of the United Kingdom and of France. We are, of course, in support of moving forward with this meeting. Resolution 2231 remains a matter properly before the Security Council. Member states have every right, and indeed this Council has a responsibility to discuss it. We are disappointed that we continue to see obstruction from 2 Council members on this file. Efforts to prevent discussion do not strengthen multilateralism. They weaken it. The Security Council should never shy away from examining issues that fall squarely within its responsibilities simply because some members find the discussion inconvenient. I urge everyone to join us in voting yes to adopt the agenda, hold the meeting, and allow the Council to proceed with its work. Thank you, sir.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement. In light of the request put forward and the remarks made by Security Council members, I suggest that we put the provisional agenda to a vote. I will now submit the provisional agenda to a vote. Those in favour of adopting the provisional agenda, non-proliferation, please raise your hands.
Ceux qui sont contre,
Against?
y a-t-il des abstentions?
Any abstentions?
Le résultat du vote est...
The outcome of the vote is as follows. 11 in favour, 2 against, 2 abstentions. The provisional agenda is hereby adopted.
C'est pas grave, je peux parler en anglais alors. C'est juste pour ça. Alors, conformément
In accordance with Rule 37 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure of the Security Council, I invite the representative of Germany to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemarie DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemarie DiCarlo.
Mr. President, as noted in the Secretary General's most recent report on Resolution 2231, dated 19 June, the International Atomic Energy Agency indicated that it had not conducted any in-field verification activities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Safeguards Agreement. This is the instrument that also enabled the agency to verify and monitor the implementation of Iran's nuclear-related commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The agency also reported a significant deterioration in its situational awareness following the attacks against Iran by the United States and Israel that began on 28 February 2026. It had now lost continuity of knowledge across all of Iran's declared nuclear facilities. This loss of continuity extended to the production and current inventory of centrifuges, rotors and bellows, heavy water, and uranium ore concentrate. The agency assessed that this knowledge could not be restored. Furthermore, Since Iran ceased the provisional application of its additional protocol in February 2021, the agency had received no updated declarations and had been unable to conduct complementary access to any sites or locations in Iran. Mr. President, while significant differences remain between the relevant parties on the way forward regarding Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA, they have all underscored the importance of a diplomatic solution and indicated readiness to engage with each other for this purpose. The 17 June Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding contains several important agreements on nuclear issues already reached between the United States and Iran. They include resolving the disposition of stockpile enriched material, on-site downblending of the enriched materials under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and a commitment to discuss the issue of enrichment and other mutually agreed matters related to Iran's nuclear needs. Today, a framework for further negotiations remains a critical step towards the peaceful settlement of the Iran nuclear issue. The Secretary General calls on all parties to engage constructively and in good faith to achieve a peaceful, comprehensive, and durable resolution of the Iran nuclear issue consistent with the objectives of Resolution 2231 and the broader goal of strengthening international peace and security. And the United Nations stands ready to support these efforts. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Madame Di Carlo.
I thank Ms. De Carlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by thanking the Undersecretary General, Ms. Rosemary De Carlo, for her briefing, and the Secretary General, who a few weeks ago published his half-yearly report on the implementation of Resolution 2231. It is of the utmost importance for the Council Presidency to allow the holding of this half-yearly meeting in accordance with established practice, and I thank you for doing so, Mr. President. Since June 2025, the Iranian nuclear issue has given rise to an acute crisis that is seriously affecting international peace and security. The origin of this crisis is the conduct of Iran, which has persistently violated its commitment under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. In this context, Iran has accumulated more than 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enriched to 60%, which is an amount sufficient to produce around 10 nuclear explosive devices. Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state to have accumulated such a quantity of enriched uranium. The IAEA has lost continuity of knowledge regarding this material as Iran has ceased granting access to IAEA inspectors. The Board of Governors of the IAEA has found Iran to be in breach of its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement in June 2025. On the 17th of June this year, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the US and Iran to bring an end to nearly 4 months of open conflict. This memorandum is a first positive step which provides for a cessation of hostilities, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to free passage of shipping, and the launch of negotiations which within 60 days should result in a robust non-proliferation agreement, which is an essential precondition for the lifting of sanctions. We note, however, that despite Pakistan and Qatar's good offices, we thank them for those, and despite the intensive discussions, Iran has violated its commitments under the memorandum. Iran has not brought an end to its attacks against vessels in the Strait, which it was obliged to provide freedom of passage to. In the last few days, it has carried out further unacceptable attacks on the Kingdom of Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan, causing the destruction of civilian infrastructure. France condemns these strikes in the strongest possible terms, and we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to the security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of all our partners in the Middle East. Iran is responsible for the current situation. Through these new attacks, it has triggered a cycle of reprisals that should come to an end without delay, which are jeopardizing the conclusion of the 60-day time frame under the memorandum for a final agreement. To come out of the current deadlock, it's essential for the current escalation to cease and for Iran to fully comply with its commitments. This should lead the negotiations to a successful conclusion, which should guarantee that Iran will no longer threaten regional and international peace and security. First, concluding a lasting agreement providing that Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon remains a priority. France supports the detailed negotiations underway with the United States on the nuclear issue. Only the conclusion and implementation of such an agreement will make it possible at the right time to consider the lifting of Security Council sanctions. In parallel with these negotiations, Iran must urgently return to full compliance with its safeguards obligations. In this regard, it must in particular provide the International Atomic Energy Agency with access and information necessary to verify the status of its stockpile of 60% enriched uranium. Let me recall that the snapback procedure was completed last September as a result of Iran's violations of its commitments under the JCPOA. Resolution 2231 remains in force and the Iranian nuclear issue remains on the Council's agenda. Iran, in this context, is under an obligation to suspend all enrichment and reprocessing activities. Second, Iran must guarantee the unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which must be open and unrestricted in accordance with the law of the sea. The recent strikes on commercial vessels in Omani territorial waters are unacceptable. France, together with the UK and other regional and international partners, has taken the initiative to establish an independent, neutral and strictly defensive multinational mission which stands ready to contribute to efforts to restore safe conditions for navigation in this international waterway, including through mine clearance operations. The involvement of a third party is essential to restore the freedom of navigation without delay, to facilitate the evacuation of seafarers and vessels, and to rebuild trust within the maritime industry on a lasting basis. This must be carried out in accordance with the framework of the law of the sea, and we will firmly oppose any arrangement that fails to comply with it. Third, Iran must put an end to its destabilizing activities against states in the region. This, firstly, means cutting off all support for non-state armed groups, including Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, radical militias in Iraq and in Syria, and secondly, bringing an end to its ballistic missile attacks. Mr. President, only the conclusion and implementation of a robust non-proliferation agreement will make it possible to consider the lifting of the relevant Security Council sanctions and lasting de-escalation in the region. We will continue to work with all of our partners to contribute to efforts aimed at achieving a durable diplomatic solution that will guarantee that Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the DRC presidency for convening this regular meeting on the report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. I also thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her valuable contribution, and I welcome the participation of the representatives of Germany and the European Union. Mr. President, while we sincerely welcome the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran, it must now be comprehensively implemented. The recent bouts of repeated escalation are unacceptable. Cessation of hostilities is crucial for the region and global stability. Iran must cease any and all threats and attacks against both the Gulf states and maritime vessels. It is imperative that free and safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz is fully restored. We reiterate the importance of diplomacy and dialogue and support much-needed negotiations regarding further elements, key among them the issue of the Iranian nuclear program. While we wish for continued diplomatic engagement and successful future talks, the legal reality so far has not changed. The UN sanctions against Iran remain in force. They reflect international law, and all UN member states, including the members of this Council, are obliged to respect and implement them. We therefore appreciate the 21st report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231, which cites the latest report of the IAEA of 4th June. The situation remains precarious. The agency has not been able to conduct any in-field verification activities at the affected facilities. Despite the binding safeguards agreement, and effectively has lost the continuity of knowledge of the most important aspects of the Iranian nuclear program, including its nuclear material and nuclear-related activities at undeclared locations. Mr. President, recent events show that Iran continues to disregard international law. If, however, Iran was serious about reaching a sustainable long-term solution to the issue of its nuclear program that would enable the lifting of international sanctions against it, the path forward is very clear. Iran must respect and implement its binding agreements under international law, most notably the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, including its obligations under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. Enrichment of up to 60%, as previously reported by the IAEA inspectors, cannot be reconciled with any peaceful purpose. Iran must meaningfully engage in serious negotiations, cease its escalatory nuclear program, and grant unhindered access to the IAEA inspectors to all relevant sites. Until then, the sanctions will remain in place. Mr. President, Latvia will continue to constructively engage on this issue in order to ensure that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. We must uphold Council decisions, including the 1737 sanctions regime, until the actions of Iran substantively change. I thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Latvia. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
President, I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her briefing and the Secretariat for its continued work on the implementation of Resolution 2231, still an essential framework for this Council. We have taken note of the Secretary General's report and the IAEA Director General's report to the Board of Governors. Greece's commitment to the global non-proliferation architecture is unwavering, and the NPT and the IAEA being its indispensable cornerstones. Mr. President, we remain deeply concerned by the scope and nature of Iran's nuclear program. Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. It must commit clearly and unconditionally to an exclusively peaceful nuclear policy. The IAEA has reported a serious loss of continuity of knowledge over Iran's activities, including the size, composition, and whereabouts of its enriched uranium stockpile. Key aspects of Iran's activities cannot be verified. Safeguards issues remain unresolved. Iran is not implementing the additional protocol or modified code 3.1. To be unequivocal, the NPT safeguards obligations permit no suspension under any circumstances. We call on Iran to restore full, effective, and constructive cooperation with the IAEA without delay. That means all necessary information and access and the immediate, full, and safe return of the agency's inspectors. Only reliable, impartial, continuous verification can restore international confidence that Iran's program is exclusively peaceful. Mr. President, diplomacy remains the only effective, sustainable path for the Iranian nuclear issue and for the wider conflict and escalation gripping the region. Greece is concerned by yet another escalation in the area and reaffirms our full solidarity with Bahrain, Kuwait, and other neighboring countries that continue to be targeted. We support negotiations between the United States and Iran and hope they can resume soon, leading to a credible, verifiable, sustainable, and durable peace. A negotiated outcome is the only path that addresses proliferation concerns, prevents further escalation, and contributes to regional stability. The preliminary agreement between the two countries should guide the steps ahead. The objectives that underpinned the JCPOA remain valid: robust verification and monitoring, a pathway to sanctions relief, and support for regional de-escalation. Any future understanding must rest on full respect for international law, the UN Charter, the NPT, Iran's safeguards obligations, and the relevant Security Council resolutions. It must deliver clear, verifiable, and lasting assurances to the international community. In closing, Mr. President, restoring international peace and security, including maritime security, with full and unconditional return to the status quo ante in the Strait of Hormuz, demands that we safeguard the non-proliferation regime. Greece urges maximum restraint and calls for dialogue and diplomacy as a matter of urgency. The stakes for regional and international peace and security are too high for any other course. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, for scheduling this meeting, and thank you to Under-Secretary General De Carlo for your briefing. We meet at an important moment following the signing of the US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding last month. The United Kingdom condemns the recent Iranian attacks in the region and on commercial shipping, but we continue to stand in solidarity with our Gulf and regional partners. The fragility of the current situation underscores the urgent need to keep the diplomatic process on track, and we stand with our partners in calling for de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. And we welcome reports that both sides are returning to talks. Colleagues, the UK's long-standing concerns over Iran's nuclear programme remain relevant and serious. As a result of Iran's significant non-performance of its JCPOA commitments, the United Kingdom, alongside France and Germany, triggered the snapback process. That process was completed on the 28th of September 2025. As a result, Council Resolution 2231 remains in force, and this Council should continue to remain seized of the Iranian nuclear issue. The provisions of the 6 resolutions that were previously lifted have also come back into effect, including a binding two-way arms embargo. And we call on all UN member states to fully comply with the provisions of the relevant resolutions. The US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding underscores that Iran shall not procure or develop nuclear weapons. That requires clear, verifiable, and meaningful steps by Iran, including full cooperation with the IAEA and effective monitoring of all nuclear material and facilities. Verification is not a technical detail. It is central to trust, to confidence, and the long-term success of any agreement. The end result must be a negotiated settlement that strengthens international and regional security, that prevents nuclear proliferation, and provides the international community with confidence that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. We're prepared to respond positively to credible, verifiable progress by Iran. And the UK stands ready to support efforts to help translate the US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding into a lasting diplomatic settlement and to address the difficult issues that remain. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. President, we're compelled to once again express our disappointment owing to the fact that the majority of Security Council members are continuing to indulge the attempts of some states to cast doubt on objective procedural reality. They are the ones who bear responsibility for all of the negative ramifications of the decision taken to hold a meeting on a non-existent agenda item, in addition to all of the legal free-for-all instigated at the Security Council in connection with the Iranian nuclear program narrative. We're grateful to colleagues who demonstrated a principled and objective position and who did not support the holding of this meeting. Mr. President, the position of the Russian Federation regarding the supposed reinstatement of anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions is well known to all. We've set out our position on many occasions at official UN meetings, at dozens of such meetings, in fact. The last such meeting being the Security Council briefing on the work of the so-called 1737 Committee, which took place about a month ago. Hence, we will not delve into the details of the reasons why the UK, France, and Germany had no right to trigger the snapback. We won't delve into those details. All interested parties can refer to our many statements, as well as to the letters disseminated at the Council by Russia, China, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Instead, we'd like to draw your attention to the fact that even Western colleagues, who, without a doubt, should have a good grasp of Security Council procedures, understand how baseless their assertions are. Their assertions to the effect that Resolution 2231 remains valid and that its full mandate and reporting cycle is being maintained. This was aptly demonstrated by the fact that the instigators of today's meeting, by how selectively they interpreted the President's note S/2016/44 and the rationale for holding the meeting. We see this as further confirmation that Resolution 2231 is no longer in force, and of the fact that certain elements stemming from the resolution's mandate are simply being used by some Western countries, not because this is what procedure calls for, but rather because it is in keeping with their position on Iran. However, if the politically motivated actions of Western states and delegations loyal thereto come as no surprise, the fact that the leadership of the UN Secretariat has joined their ranks is categorically unacceptable. The SG's report is not just a document drafted by Mr. Antonio Guterres, one for which he bears personal responsibility. In fact, the publication of this report is an example of the flagrant violation by the SG of his mandate and Security Council decisions, which were set forth in Resolution 2231. We won't delve into the contents of the report, and there's not much to delve into. What we will note is that the continued publication of such reports, in addition to other illegal steps, unauthorized steps taken by the Secretariat, for instance, notifying member states about the re-entry into force of anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions, the reinstatement of the 1737 Committee website and its sanctions list, as well as attempts to establish the composition of its group of experts, well, they are nothing but a violation of Rule 100, Article 100 of the UN Charter. We reject such arbitrary actions taken by the Secretariat. We call for the leadership to fix these immediately. President, turning to the Iranian nuclear program as a whole, we cannot but draw your attention to the cynical attempts by Western states to lay their own fault at somebody else's door. It's an open secret that the JCPOA implementation crisis was prompted by the unilateral withdrawal of the US from that agreement back in 2018. Thus, it's very strange to hear from the US delegation these very strong pronouncements supporting Security Council Resolution 2231. What happened next? The crisis was exacerbated as the European members to the nuclear deal were not able to uphold their commitments. As a result, the UK, France, Germany, and their cheerleaders not only decided to further escalate the situation by seeking the snapback being triggered, but in practice they supported the US and Israeli strikes on Iranian territory, including on peaceful atom infrastructure, which is under IAEA safeguards. And from these delegations, we continue to hear concoctions about a supposed threat emanating from the Iranian nuclear program. And it must be said that they're based entirely on their fabrications. After all, the Iranian leadership has confirmed and continues to confirm the fact that it has no plans to acquire a nuclear weapon. And the IAEA, not once, I underscore this, not once did the IAEA verify the transfer of nuclear materials to military uses in Iran. Every time we see the EU and the US colleagues demanding for Iran to engage in serious talks, well, they're saying this although Iran was attacked twice at the height of such diplomatic efforts, and despite this, Iran actually continued its contacts with the US. Moreover, we regularly hear at Security Council meetings absurd allegations being leveled at Iran, allegations that on its territory, the IAEA has not been undertaking its verification activities for a year now. And yet the delegations leveling these obligations can't even name what actually happened, what transpired in June of 2025, what made the work of IAEA inspectors impossible. It was the first series of US and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. We get the impression that some Security Council members, ignoring the root causes of the current escalation in the Middle East, are beginning to believe their own alternative reality, the one they crafted. They don't want to accept what is patently obvious. They are refusing to call a spade a spade. Mr. President, the Russian Federation categorically rejects attempts to continue to escalate tensions without any grounds for doing so surrounding the Iranian issue. We also reject attempts to use the Security Council for political score settling with Iran. These actions undertaken by Western countries first create a threat to the very tense situation in the region, especially in light of the latest events, and second, further exacerbate the procedural crisis at the Security Council, which is having a negative impact on the Council's work across various spheres, in first and foremost as regards subsidiary bodies. Currently, the Security Council should have entirely different issues on its agenda. We bear responsibility for creating enabling conditions for de-escalation and ongoing diplomatic efforts, kick-started with the assistance of Pakistan and other states. They are what instills hope of resolving any contradictions and misunderstandings using peaceful means. We urge Western colleagues to focus on this kind of work rather on their phantom pains regarding UN Security Council Resolution 2231. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to thank the delegation of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for convening this meeting on implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. I also thank USG De Carlo, USG for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, for her briefing. We also express our appreciation for His Excellency the Secretary General for presenting the 21st report, which underscores the importance of following up on the implementation of the resolution as the existing legal framework governing the Council's consideration of the Iranian nuclear program, and also the resolution's pivotal role in the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, since the 28th of February, our region is witnessing one of the most dangerous waves of escalation in its modern history as a result of Iran's brutal, unjustified attacks against the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, using ballistic missiles and drones, targeting civilian objects, energy facilities, and vital infrastructure. In addition, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz to international navigation, creating an unprecedented reality for the global economy, international trade, and energy and food supplies. These attacks have caused significant losses of life and property and have had serious repercussions for citizens and residents, manifested in a sense of insecurity and erosion of confidence and destabilization. The situation continues to affect the people of the region, and it underscores that security and stability can only be achieved through lasting peace, compliance to international law, and respect for the sovereignty of states. Mr. President, in this context, the Kingdom of Bahrain wishes to convey three main messages. First, the Kingdom of Bahrain stresses that diplomatic efforts aimed at addressing the Iranian nuclear issue cannot achieve their objectives unless they are reflected in Iran's regional conduct. Resolution 2231 was the product of years of diplomacy in which the Council invested its hope to address the issue through peaceful means. However, the findings of the Secretary General's report and the assessments of the IAEA confirm that this objective remains out of reach and has not yet been achieved. The experience has also demonstrated that the problem was never the absence of agreements, but rather the absence of commitment to their implementation. Today, the same pattern repeats itself. Only hours after the announcement of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, Iran rushed to undermine its peaceful content by resuming its attacks against the Kingdom of Bahrain and the sisterly state of Kuwait and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and threatening the security and freedom of international navigation and targeting the commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, including the Qatari tanker Riqayat and the Saudi tanker Wadian. And just as Iran has failed to comply with the obligations of Resolution 2231, it similarly did not honor the commitments it undertook in the recent Memorandum of Understanding, nor did it heed the international community's calls as expressed in the Resolution 2817, which called on Iran to cease its attacks against the states in the region. This reinforces the impression that for Iran, diplomacy is not a path for resolving disputes, but rather a means of managing crises and gaining time. While its positions and aggressions on the ground are expressed through ballistic missiles, drones, and the support, financing, training, and arming of Iran's proxies. What Iran is doing today is not an isolated development. It's an extension of a negotiation approach that has become accustomed to using agreements as a means of easing pressure, while actions on the ground continue in the opposite direction. This gives rise to the question that the Council must ask itself: until when will the international community continue to address Iranian commitments in isolation from its record of non-implementation? And for how long will diplomacy remain hostage to promises that do not translate into compliance? Second, no diplomatic progress will be sustainable without full and transparent compliance with international obligations and full cooperation with the IAEA. The Secretary General's report confirms the continued challenges related to verification and monitoring and the loss of the continuity of knowledge regarding the Iranian nuclear program. It is therefore a necessary condition to restore full cooperation with the agency to rebuild confidence. Third, restoring confidence is not limited to the nuclear program, but it also extends to its entire hostile conduct in the region. We cannot speak of sustainable security or confidence building while attacks against states of the region continue, while targeting maritime passages, commercial vessels, tankers, and while Iran continues to support its proxies and finance and arm them. These practices constitute a single pattern that undermines security and weakens confidence in diplomacy. Mr. President, the experience has proven that agreements alone are not enough. Security Council resolutions will not achieve their objectives unless they are accompanied by effective implementation mechanisms and compliance. If the Council has played a pivotal role on this file, it is now called upon to safeguard the credibility of its resolutions and their implementation, and to confront any conduct that undermines their objectives. The success of any diplomatic effort remains contingent on the commitment of all parties, especially Iran. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain calls upon the Security Council to continue discharging its responsibilities by the Charter and to ensure the full implementation of its resolutions, including 2231. The Council should not allow for its resolutions or international obligations to become mere texts without implementation. In order to preserve the Council's credibility and to promote peace, security, and stability in the region and the world. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Bahrain for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Panama. Thank you, Mr. President. We greet and thank the Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, and we thank her for her briefing. We greet here the representatives of the delegations who honor us with their participation today. We take note of the Secretary General's 21st report on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231 of the 2015, which provides an update regarding the status of implementation of the resolution and includes a summary of the latest report of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, on its activities in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We note with deep concern the IAEA's findings, which highlight the persistent obstacles preventing the agency from fully carrying out its verification and monitoring responsibilities under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT Safeguards Agreement, and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. We are equally concerned that the commitments undertaken under the JCPOA have not been fully implemented for more than 5 years now. This has prevented the IAEA from providing credible assurances regarding the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program and has significantly constrained the fulfillment of its mandate. In light of the recent attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities and their effects and consequences, we reiterate our call on Iran to cooperate fully, immediately, and on a sustained basis with the IAEA by facilitating the access it requires, providing the necessary updated information, and ensuring the conditions that enable the agency to carry out its verification activities independently and effectively. Such cooperation is essential to restoring confidence and contributing to regional and international stability. We place our hope in the continuation of dialogue between the United States and Iran as a constructive step towards easing tensions, containing risks, and ensuring a cessation of attacks on vessels serving international waterways, restoring free navigation, and advancing towards a sustainable, comprehensive diplomatic solution strengthening regional stability. We hope that the agreements reached will complement the binding non-proliferation commitments already made. Further, we trust that a full return to compliance with international obligations, together with verifiable cooperation with the IAEA, will remain the essential foundation for a diplomatic resolution to the outstanding concerns. And finally, President, we call on all parties to act responsibly and to refrain from taking any measures that could further exacerbate tensions. Thank you very much. I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, President. Pakistan expresses its deep concern at the escalation in tensions in the region, which is in no one's interest. The cycle of violence and instability must end for the good of regional and international peace, security, and prosperity. all efforts should be made to restore normalcy and bring the parties back to the negotiations table. Pakistan calls on all parties to exercise restraint and refrain from any actions that may further undermine regional peace and stability. Evidently, there is no alternative to continued engagement, dialogue, and diplomacy to achieve the shared goal of peace and stability in the region. President, we reiterate our support for the resolution of all outstanding issues, including the Iran nuclear issue, through peaceful means, diplomatic engagement, and sustained dialogue. We have always emphasized that diplomacy and dialogue should remain the guiding principles for achieving negotiated settlement of all contentious issues in accordance with the rights, obligations, and responsibilities of the parties concerned. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, signed last month, offers a viable roadmap to address all outstanding issues through diplomatic means. The two parties agreed to address issues through negotiations in order to reach a mutually acceptable settlement. Any interruption in this diplomatic process would complicate the issues further. Pakistan urges all sides to uphold their respective commitments under the Islamabad MOU, which remains an enduring foundation for understanding, mutual respect, and shared prosperity for the region and beyond. Pakistan, along with partners, has been making constructive diplomatic engagement in supporting de-escalation, ceasefire efforts, and the broader pursuit of stability in the region. We are heartened by the expert-level talks held so far and the positive progress made on issues related to the aspects of the Islamabad MOU. And we look forward to continued constructive engagement between the parties. President, as these sensitive negotiations continue, we should avoid any actions or messaging that may contribute to misunderstanding. All our efforts and energies should be devoted to advancing the implementation of the Islamabad MOU. Pakistan will continue its efforts to realize the objectives of the Islamabad MOU, achievement of a comprehensive final deal, and advancement of peace and security for the benefit of all in the region and beyond. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
主席
President, China voted no in the procedural vote on the provisional agenda. We register our regret about the result of the vote. Following the signing of the MOU between the US and Iran, tensions in the Middle East eased temporarily. The ceasefire, however, is currently facing setbacks and challenges, complicating the prospects for negotiations. The proper settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue bears on the restoration of peace and stability in the Middle East and concerns the shared interests of the international community. The parties involved should advance negotiations with a rational and pragmatic attitude. I would like to emphasize 3 points. First, it is vital to maintain the cessation of hostilities. Pursuant to the memorandum, the US and Iran commit themselves to respecting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, permanently halting military activities across all fronts, and establishing a roadmap for negotiations and the lifting of sanctions. China welcomes these commitments and highly appreciates the efforts made by Pakistan and relevant regional countries in this regard. China urges the parties concerned to filter out distractions, renounce the use or threat of force, safeguard and implement the outcomes of the MOU, reach a solution that addresses each other's concerns, lift sanctions on Iran the soonest, and strive for substantive progress in the political settlement process. Second, it is imperative to uphold a correct sense of right and wrong. Addressing the Iranian nuclear issue requires respecting the legitimate demands as well as lawful rights and interests of the parties concerned. Iran should continue to honor its commitment not to develop nuclear weapons. As a state party to the NPT and a non-nuclear weapon state, Iran enjoys the legitimate right to the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. The peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program must be ensured through strict IAEA safeguards. The unilateral withdrawal of the US from the JCPOA triggered the Iranian nuclear crisis. Furthermore, it was the 2 rounds of US strikes on Iran that rendered Iran's nuclear facilities inaccessible to IAEA inspections. The US should take concrete actions to create favorable conditions for political settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue. Third, the Security Council should play a constructive role. The memorandum between the US and Iran states that the final agreement will be endorsed by the Security Council, fully demonstrating the Council's pivotal position in seeking a political settlement of the issue at hand. Security Council Resolution 2231 expired on October 18th of 2025. The Security Council has ended its consideration of the Iranian nuclear issue. The priority now for the Council is to uphold objectivity and impartiality, allow time and space for diplomatic efforts, foster a positive and favorable atmosphere for negotiations, and avoid becoming a tool for a few countries to advance their own political agendas or exert pressure. President, since the eruption of the conflict in the Middle East, China has been actively working to end hostilities and promote peace. As a party to the JCPOA and a permanent member of the Security Council, China has consistently upheld an objective and impartial stance, stressing the need to resume talks and preserve the political settlement process. China has addressed multiple letters to the Council and the DGA to articulate our views and proposals. China stays committed to playing an active and constructive role in achieving enduring peace in the Middle East and will contribute its wisdom and efforts toward a peaceful settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, I thank the Undersecretary General, Ms. De Carlo, for her briefing today. The Secretary General's report on the implementation of Resolution 2231 is no merely technical account. It is also a warning regarding the deterioration of elements that for years allowed the international community to rely on objective assurances regarding the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. What we are seeing today is not the result of an isolated event, rather the consequence of unmet commitments, the erosion of trust, and the weakening of the incentives underpinning the framework that was agreed in 2015, particularly as a result of the reduced cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has contributed significantly to undermining the verification architecture supported by Resolution 2231. Against this backdrop, Colombia welcomes the recent diplomatic progress achieved between Iran and the United States, facilitated by Pakistan and Qatar. The Memorandum of Understanding is an encouraging sign and offers an opportunity that should not be missed. Mr. President, agreements such as this demonstrate that consensus building remains possible. More importantly, they pave the way towards a negotiated solution with regard to the verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear program. In this regard, Colombia believes that the experience of the JCPOA offers a valuable lesson. That instrument not only managed to establish limits and verification mechanisms, but also demonstrated that balanced, technically sound, and transparent agreements can be reached even in situations marked by profound mistrust. Today, as avenues for dialogue begin to reopen, that experience can serve as a useful point of reference, reminding us that lasting progress can only be built on respect for international obligations and genuine political will. What is at stake here is not only the situation surrounding Iran's nuclear issue, but also the ability of states to forge and preserve common rules and to trust in those as tools for managing their differences. When trust disappears, uncertainty takes over. And when uncertainty becomes the guiding principle for international action, the logic of confrontation gains ground. To that end, the Security Council has a responsibility to help create the political conditions necessary to consolidate the progress achieved and transform this opportunity into sustainable results. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening the Council for this discussion that stresses the continuing relevance of Resolution 2231. And thank you, Undersecretary General DiCarlo, for your presentation. The proliferation challenge posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran demands this Council's sustained attention, and this body must remain fully engaged. The Secretary General's 21st report, published June 9th, makes plain that except for paragraphs 7, 8, 16, and 20, Resolution 2231 and its associated practical arrangements remain operative. Through the snapback mechanism established under Resolution 2231, the Council reinstated Resolutions 1696, 1737, 1747, 1803, 1835, and 1929. The measures reinstated last September were designed to address a nuclear program that is long sought to advance beyond the international community's line of sight. Last month, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted a resolution which received broad international support and reiterated the body's concern with Iran's continued non-compliance with its IAEA obligations under its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. The IAEA has reported that since the military strikes of June 2025, it has lost the continuity of knowledge regarding previously declared inventories of nuclear material at all affected Iranian facilities. And since late February 2026, that loss of continuity extends to every declared nuclear facility in Iran, with the exception of Bushehr. Iran has not engaged the IAEA on unresolved safeguard issues, has not provided updated information and declarations under its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and additional protocol, and has denied inspectors access to its highly enriched uranium stockpile and other previously declared low-enriched uranium stocks for over a year. In defying its Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, required safeguards agreement, Iran also contravenes its obligations under the resolutions reinstated last fall. Over the last week, Iran has taken actions that defy the substance and the spirit of the understanding established between our two countries. We have witnessed Iran deploy cruise missiles and UAVs, weapons that are restricted under these Security Council resolutions, against commercial vessels lawfully transiting Omani waters and infrastructure in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, and Qatar. Iran's leaders have a historic opportunity to transform their country for their people. The decision is theirs. We made progress in our discussions with Iran with the signing of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. The door to diplomacy remains open, and is our preferred path to resolve concerns related to Iran's nuclear program. We hope Iran chooses to come back into compliance with its obligations and to engage seriously in talks toward reaching a final deal. While dialogue remains possible, we cannot negotiate while Iran reneges on the basic obligations, simple obligations, such as don't shoot at civilian objects. But to be clear, the United States stands ready to hold Iran to account for its acts that defy international peace and security. If you shoot at civilian objects or ships, we will respond. Until a final deal is reached and endorsed and adopted by this Council to lift sanctions under these resolutions, member states must implement the reinstated resolutions in good faith. They represent the Council's most effective, peaceful instrument for constraining escalation and preserving international security. Fundamentally, Iran has contravened international law and this Council's resolutions. Such transgressions cannot be met with Council equivocation and obstruction. In subverting the 1737 regime, UN sanctions architecture that this body elected to impose, members not only contradict the will of this Council, they also constrain the non-kinetic tools available to resolve conflict. Again, President Trump prefers peace. And we urge fellow Council members to join us in upholding the instruments of this body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the United States. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary DiCarlo for her briefing and the Secretary General for his report on the implementation on Resolution 2231. Mr. President, Denmark supports all diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions and to bring about a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. We express our concern about the recent escalation in the region and strongly condemn Iran's latest attacks in the Strait of Hormuz and on the neighboring countries, which pose a threat to the safety and stability of the entire region. We urge all parties to show restraint. We call on Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz with unconditional and unrestricted freedom of navigation. The ceasefire must be respected, and the Memorandum of Understanding must be fully implemented. Mr. President, Denmark has repeatedly made its position clear. Iran must never acquire or develop a nuclear weapon. In light of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium and its previous enrichment activities, its lack of cooperation with the IAEA constitutes a nuclear proliferation crisis. We remain fully committed to a durable, long-term negotiated solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. To achieve this objective, reliable and impartial information about the status of Iran's nuclear program is imperative. We therefore call on Iran to comply with its obligation to provide verifiable declarations about the quantity and whereabouts of the nuclear material and related activities to the IAEA, whose monitoring and verification work will be key in any future deal. The IAEA inspectors must be allowed to adequate access to all of Iran's nuclear facilities. We urge Iran to cooperate fully with the IAEA and comply with its legally binding obligations under the NPT and its safeguards agreement, as well as with the resolutions of the IAEA Board of Governors. Mr. President, the reinstatement of 6 Security Council resolutions as a result of the snapback, as approved by this Council, requires Iran to suspend all activities related to uranium enrichment, reprocessing in and heavy water, and to discontinue the construction of related facilities. Denmark calls on all UN member states to fully implement the restrictive measures under these fully reinstated resolutions. Mr. President, in closing, Denmark has always supported diplomatic efforts as the only way to bring about a durable solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. It remains fundamental for maintaining peace and security in the broader Middle East and beyond. We stand ready to work with all parties to this end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. We join in thanking the Undersecretary General for her briefing and in welcoming the distinguished colleagues participating. Mr. President, we navigate a highly sensitive moment for this Council. A profound procedural division now exists among members, and it regards the operational status of this resolution and its legacy mechanisms. Liberia notes these differing legal positions. Yet, we believe that our collective focus must transcend procedural stalemates and be subordinated to a higher universal imperative, the integrity of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and our shared responsibility to protect humanity from the catastrophic risks of nuclear proliferation. Amid acute regional volatility and recent hostilities, the erosion of verification architecture represents an unacceptable danger to global security. History proves that when multilateral communication fractures, the space for miscalculation grows exponentially. No single power bloc benefits from a monitoring vacuum. Therefore, as a nation fundamentally committed to its NPT obligations, Liberia emphasizes two principles to bridge current divisions. First, transparency must outlast political disputes. Technical cooperation with the IAEA is a fundamental legal obligation under the NPT Safeguards Agreement. This is distinct from the obligations from the political life cycle of Resolution 2231. We call on all relevant actors to facilitate full, unimpeded monitoring access to accurately reconstruct nuclear baselines. Second, we must seize the existing diplomatic window. Liberia welcomes recent mediations and the interim Memorandum of Understanding aimed at lowering regional tensions. Rather than leaning into rigid punitive measures that close diplomatic doors, this Council should universally support the current 60-day negotiation framework to secure a verified and permanent settlement. Mr. President, Resolution 2231 stands as historical proof that even the most complex security crises can be resolved through reciprocal good faith diplomacy. Liberia urges all major powers to exercise maximum restraint and unite behind a credible diplomatic pathway. Our common commitment to non-proliferation must remain absolute. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Liberia for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we thank USU DiCarlo for her briefing. Somalia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the maintenance of international peace and security under the United Nations Charter. We recognize the indispensable role that the IAEA verification and monitoring play in safeguarding enriched uranium and ensuring nuclear safety and global stability. Mr. President, as we gather here today, Somalia is deeply concerned by the continued attacks on the sovereign territories of the brotherly countries of Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan, as well as the broader pattern of military escalations across the Middle East. These renewed attacks and escalations risk further destabilizing and carrying profound implications for regional security and the global economy. Somalia reiterates that all member states must respect their obligations under international law, including the Charter, which prohibit the threat of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations Charter. In this regard, we call for respect for the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of these brotherly countries in the Gulf. We urge all parties to engage in dialogue and avoid any action that could escalate tensions or threaten regional peace and stability. We also reiterate our call for the protection of civilian and civilian infrastructure and emphasize that international law and the United Nations Charter must be upheld and respected. Mr. President, Somalia welcomes the June 17 signing of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran, facilitated by Pakistan and Qatar. We stress the importance of maintaining momentum toward a more permanent end to all hostilities, and we urge all parties to honor their commitment in good faith and recommit to a comprehensive non-proliferation dialogue to restore confidence. Furthermore, we reiterate our call for the establishment of a Middle East free of nuclear weapons and for all regional states to join the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons without exception. We also reiterate the importance of guaranteeing the freedom of navigation in international waterways, including the Strait of Hormuz. We call all parties to refrain from actions that undermine maritime security and the free flow of commerce upon which the global economy depends. To conclude, Mr. President, the challenges before us require a collective response grounded in the principle of good neighborliness, genuine dialogue, mutual respect, and renewed commitment to multilateralism. Somalia remains committed to engaging constructively with all Council members toward a durable, negotiated resolution that prevents further escalation and addresses the legitimate concerns of all stakeholders. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement. I will now deliver a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Distinguished members of the Council, the Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to thank the Secretary General for the 21st report. The DRC remains unswervingly committed to the principles of multilateralism, the respect for international law, and the central role of the United Nations in promoting international peace and security. In this spirit, we would like to reaffirm our commitment to international efforts seeking to prevent nuclear proliferation, as well as to the peaceful settlement of disputes by means of dialogue and diplomacy. My delegation has taken note of the remarks contained in the SG's report, in particular those related to recent assessments by the IAEA, assessments which spotlight the difficulties the agency has encountered in exercising its verification and monitoring activities. This situation underscores the importance of preserving the conditions necessary for the agency to discharge its technical mandate effectively in the interests of transparency, mutual trust, and in furtherance of the international non-proliferation regime. The Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to reassert the importance of upholding the independence, impartiality, and technical capacity of the IAEA. On this note, we'd like to highlight ongoing positive cooperation with the agency. This is important so as to bolster trust and promote a lasting solution to the concerns surrounding the Iranian nuclear program, and this in accordance with applicable international non-proliferation obligations. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has taken note of the diverging positions expressed by Council members on the issues on our agenda today. Without prejudice to the different assessments expressed on this issue, my delegation remains convinced that the Security Council should be able to continue its work in the spirit of responsibility, mutual respect, and constructive dialogue. Upholding the authority, the credibility, as well as the smooth functioning of this organ is a responsibility that falls to all of us collectively. My delegation is of the view that nuclear non-proliferation is one of the key pillars of our collective security. Furthermore, we stand convinced that no lasting solution can be found without a resolute commitment to dialogue, diplomacy, and negotiations. It is in this spirit that we encourage all initiatives likely to promote the restoration of trust between the parties and creating conducive conditions to further diplomatic efforts. Far from being wishful thinking, this call encapsulates the unstinting commitment of the DRC to the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, as well as our conviction that dialogue is the only possible path towards a lasting settlement. My delegation is disquieted by the deterioration of the regional security context, as well as by the ramifications of the recent hostilities, the ramifications they're having on the prospects of a lasting settlement. These developments recall the urgency of prioritizing restraint and avoiding any actions which might further fuel tensions, as well as of upholding the necessary preconditions for de-escalation. Stability in the Middle East remains a serious challenge to international peace and security. Now, more than ever, it requires us to make a collective commitment to diplomacy. By way of conclusion, the Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to reiterate its commitment to the objectives of nuclear non-proliferation, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the central role played by the Security Council in the maintenance of international peace and security. Differences of opinion, which member states may harbor, should never distract us from our primary responsibility, as enshrined in the United Nations Charter, that responsibility being the maintenance of international peace and security. It is in this spirit that the Democratic Republic of the Congo will continue supporting all initiatives which might help promote a de-escalation, dialogue, as well as lasting negotiated solutions which are mutually acceptable. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President.
I'm honored to address the Council today on behalf of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. I would also like to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the Secretariat for their work related to the implementation of Resolution 2231. We take note of the 21st report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231 and thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing. The European Union welcomed the Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran and encourages continuation of negotiations, which would provide an opportunity for regional stability and the full restoration of freedom of navigation and safe transit through the Strait of Hormuz. This is essential for regional stability and the global economy. We again commend Pakistan, Qatar, and other regional partners for their mediation. We firmly believe that diplomacy is the only way to sustainably resolve all outstanding concerns, including on Iran's nuclear and ballistic programs and its destabilizing activities in the region. Parties should continue engaging in good faith in efforts to reach a sustainable agreement and can count on Europe to support diplomacy. The EU has decade-long engagement and expertise negotiating with Iran on the nuclear file and beyond, and is ready to use its sanctions-lifting leverage, provided Iran changes its behavior on the ground in a verifiable way. The High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy will continue to engage to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program in line with UNSCR resolutions 2231, 1929, and 1803. Colleagues, despite all diplomatic efforts, Iran's escalating nuclear trajectory over the last 6 years continues an urgent and profound nuclear proliferation concern in the region. As of June 25, Iran's stockpile of uranium enriched up to 60% comprised 440 kilograms. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been unable to further verify and for 2025 cannot draw any safeguards conclusions with respect to nuclear material previously declared due to Iran's persistent lack of cooperation. IAEA Director General has reported that the agency has lost continuity of knowledge regarding the previously declared inventories of nuclear material in Iran and its enrichment capacities, including low and highly enriched uranium. Iran must not ever be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. We call on Iran to return to full compliance with its legal obligations under the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and its binding Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. It is critical and urgent that Iran reestablishes full cooperation with IAEA to allow the monitoring of clear and verifiable steps that Iran should take in relation to negotiations on its nuclear program. The European Union fully supports the impartial role of the IAEA and its Director General in their critical work to uphold the implementation of safeguards, nuclear safety and security, and to provide clarity on Iran's nuclear program. The High Representative will remain engaged with all relevant parties, including Iran, and spare no effort to support political and diplomatic efforts to find a negotiated solution in all areas of concern and to promote conditions for greater regional cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank Mr. Lambrinidis for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President.
The Security Council today. I would like to thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her valuable briefing on the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. We greatly appreciate the Council's continued engagement on the critical issue of the Iranian nuclear program, which poses a threat to peace and security, which requires collective action. The JCPOA, endorsed by Resolution 2231 over 10 years ago, was a landmark agreement that successfully concluded years of negotiation. The recent Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the United States was a diplomatic breakthrough, and we thank all those involved, including Pakistan, Qatar, and all other mediators on this achievement. We condemn Iran's recent attacks in the Strait of Hormuz and against regional states, and strongly encourage to continue the negotiations. In these uncertain times, it is essential to emphasize the following: a very verifiable agreement that addresses the urgent concerns regarding Iran's nuclear activities is indispensable. Germany, together with its E3 partners, stands ready to support negotiations, as well as the implementation of future agreements with diplomatic and technical means. We are furthermore prepared to assess and support lifting nuclear-related sanctions, but only after concrete, verifiable steps by Iran on its nuclear program and Iran's return to full compliance with its legally binding obligations under the NPT and all relevant Security Council resolutions. Until we reach this decisive point, we must continue to ensure that established UN nations procedures, such as the 1737 Sanctions Committee, remain intact. And allow me, Mr. President, to highlight the following 2 points. First, we deeply regret that 2 members of the Security Council continue to block any progress regarding the implementation of the reinstated Security Council resolution, whether it be updating the sanction list or establishing a panel of experts. We consider and deeply regret that the United Nations as a whole, and the Security Council in particular, are undermined by this approach. Second, we reiterate that the essential role of the International Atomic Energy Agency and that Iran must resume full cooperation with the agency, allow its inspectors access, and disclose the location and quantity of all enriched nuclear material, in particular the stockpile of highly enriched uranium for which there is no civilian justification. Mr. President, it is in all of our interest that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. Germany, with its E3 partners France and the United Kingdom, will continue to do its utmost to ensure a sustainable and verifiable solution that addresses all concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Germany for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting stands adjourned.